When I was about to die, my son of 28 years rolled his eyes and said, "TSK, the doctor is urging us to pay the fees again." My husband sat on the sofa, peeling an orange with his head down, his tone flat. "Stop the treatment. No matter how much money we spend, it won't be enough to cure your mother's illness." I was in so much pain that I was drenched in cold sweat, my throat filled with the taste of blood, but I still forced myself to reach for the nightstand. I wanted to tell them that I had money. Over the years, I had scrimped and saved, secretly putting aside a card with enough money to complete the remaining treatments. But before I could reach the drawer, my son grabbed my hand and held it down. "Mom, stop making a fuss. Dad has worked hard all these years. When I get married, buy a house, and have kids in the future, which of those doesn't cost money? You have to think about the living." I looked at him, feeling as if a piece of my chest had been carved out. Even though he wasn't born from my womb, I raised him with every spoonful of rice porridge and every dose of medicine. When he had a high fever, I carried him on my back and ran through 3 streets. When he coughed so hard in the middle of the night that he couldn't catch his breath, I held him in my arms and sat at the emergency room entrance until dawn. The first time he called me Mom, I cried until my eyes were swollen. In the end, he resented me for living even one more day, thinking it was a waste of money. Later, my husband took away my painkillers and brought me home, saying the hospital was just trying to scam us. I endured 8 months of agony in bed. When the pain became so unbearable that I lost my senses, I heard a woman's laughter in the living room. On the day I took my last breath, my husband personally opened the door and welcomed Lily inside. Lily held the son I had been thinking about before I died, her tears falling with genuine sorrow. My son called out to her with reddened eyes, "Mom." That cry was like a knife, stabbing me so deeply that even my soul trembled. Only then did I see clearly. I've lived my whole life raising someone else's son, guarding someone else's home, and preparing the wedding dress for someone else. When I opened my eyes again, my 25-year-old husband was standing at the door. He was holding a baby in his arms, his eyes as gentle as the night he deceived me in my past life. "Clara, this child is so pitiful. Let's adopt him." I stared at the child in his arms, a chill creeping up my spine inch by inch. Once again, finally, it was my turn to speak. "Get lost to the orphanage." The wind at the door blew in, carrying the chill of early spring. Ethan stood outside my door, holding the child, frozen for several seconds. "Clara, what did you say?" I leaned against the door, my tone colder than the wind outside. I said, "Send him to the welfare home. If you have a kind heart, you go and send him. Don't shove the child into my arms." Ethan frowned, his expression looking very unpleasant. He has always had me under his thumb. Growing up in the same alley, I followed behind him for many years. A single glance from him could make me happy for half the day in my past life. He stood here, too, holding a child with reddened eyes, saying, "This is a life." My heart softened. I tore up the plane ticket, gave up the chance to go abroad, and got married. Then I stepped into the quagmire and never climbed out again. This time, I didn't even lift an eyelid. Ethan held the child tightly, lowering his voice. "Clara, I'm not joking with you. The baby was just born not long ago, abandoned by the trash bin, crying so hard it was almost out of breath. You study rehabilitation. Your heart is the softest. Can you bear to watch him die?" I smiled. "My heart is soft. What does that have to do with you? I'm an unmarried woman. Why should I raise your child? If you truly care, raise him yourself." Ethan's breath hitched. It was probably the first time he'd heard such words from me, and the gentleness on his face couldn't hold up any longer. "Clara, we're already engaged. Sooner or later, we'll get married, and sooner or later, we'll have children. What's the harm in raising him at home first?" I looked at him, my palms growing colder bit by bit. He said the same thing in my past life. We'll get married sooner or later. We'll have children sooner or later. After getting married and raising a child, I've worn myself out into a haggard housewife, while he turned around and tucked Lily into his heart, even raising a son for them. I turned my head away, not wanting to say more to him. Ethan, I'm going on an exchange to Vienna next month. Have you forgotten? The application materials have already been submitted, and the flight tickets are booked. If you want to show kindness, go find someone else. Mentioning the exchange spot, a flicker of panic flashed in Ethan's eyes. Soon, he put on a pleading expression again. Clara, I didn't stop you from studying abroad, but the child is innocent. Take him home first. Wait until he's stable before deciding anything else. Consider it as accumulating good karma for yourself. I stared at him. How ridiculous. Using my life to accumulate good karma for him. Seeing that I hadn't moved, Ethan took another step forward, his voice dropping even lower. Don't be afraid. When we have our own children in the future, I'll definitely love my biological ones more. This child can just have a title. Life won't be disrupted. My chest churned violently, and I nearly vomited. Fragments from my past life suddenly flooded my mind. When the child had a fever, I stayed up all night watching over him. Ethan lay in bed saying he had worked the next day and told me not to make noise. When I had a miscarriage at 2 months pregnant, blood soaked my pants. But Ethan was in the living room holding our child while talking on the phone with Lily, calling me overly dramatic. On the day my cancer metastasized, he was still discussing with our son where to get the down payment. I stared at Ethan, enunciating each word clearly. Ethan, you truly disgust me. His face turned ashen, his fingers tightening inch by inch. The child in his arms, squeezed uncomfortably, began to wail at the top of its lungs. Just then, someone came running from the mouth of the alley. Ethan, the boss is looking for you. The phone's been ringing off the hook. The person who arrived was Ethan's colleague, panting heavily. He glanced at me, then looked at the child in his arms. His expression strange. My heart turned cold. Here we go again. It was the same in my previous life. Ethan had called someone over ahead of time, putting on an act of being forced into a corner, waiting for me to soften and say that I would take the child first, and that he would come back as soon as he was done. And then this busyness lasted a lifetime. I stood at the door, not moving a muscle. Ethan's eyes flickered a few times, finally growing anxious. Clara, I'm begging you, hold him for me for a moment. I'll be right back. With that, he actually shoved the swaddled baby right into my arms and turned to run. The weight of the child, carrying the scent of milk, suddenly pressed down on me, and my back stiffened. By the time I regained my senses, he had already turned the corner of the alley, leaving only that colleague standing awkwardly in place. Sister-in-law. This, Ethan really has an urgent matter. Get lost. Holding the child, I coldly uttered a single word. My colleague gave an awkward laugh, then turned and ran. The door opened behind me. My mother stood inside the door, drowsy-eyed, and was startled when she saw the child in my arms. Clara, whose child is this? I looked down at the little baby in my arms, whose face was red from crying, and felt no tenderness in my heart. In my past life, I gave my life just to hear the word mom. In this life, I just want to reclaim the days that belong to me. I carried the child into the house and quickly fetched paper and a pen. When I finished writing that note, my fingertips were steady as could be. My mother was still asking questions beside me, but I only looked up and said one thing. Mom, lend me your driver for a moment. I'm going to take the child back to his biological mother's doorstep. Lily lives on the 6th floor of the neighboring building. In my past life, I had known her for many years. She has a fair complexion, speaks softly and gently, and when she smiles, the corners of her eyes curve. Everyone who sees her praises her good temper. When I gave up the opportunity to study abroad for her, she hugged me with reddened eyes and said she would remember my kindness for a lifetime. Later, when I was on the verge of death, she stood in my living room wearing the cashmere coat I couldn't bear to buy in my youth, patting my son's head and telling him not to cry. What a coincidence. Her way of remembering me for a lifetime was certainly unforgettable. I stood at her doorstep holding the child and rang the doorbell. The sound of slippers quickly came from inside. The door opened just a crack. When Lily saw the baby in my arms, the color drained from her face instantly. I placed the swaddled baby at her feet and tucked the note into her hand. Here's your child. The debt Ethan owes you. You two can settle it slowly. Lily was so flustered she even wanted to shut the door. I raised my hand to hold the door panel, my voice not loud. There's surveillance in the hallway. If you dare throw him out again, I'll send the video to your workplace. Her hand trembled and her lips turned pale. I didn't say anything more and turned to leave. As I went downstairs, the driver my father had sent followed from a distance and gave me a nod. The weight pressing on my heart finally eased a little. After returning home, I washed my hands 3 times, but my palms still felt cold. I slept very lightly that night. Dreams are filled with events from my past life. I was cooking porridge in the kitchen when Lily sent a message to Ethan saying the child missed their biological mother again. My son handed the award certificate to Lily and said with a smile, "If only you had come back sooner." I lay on the hospital bed, curled up in pain, while Ethan stood by the window, making a phone call with his back turned to me. "She won't last much longer. Don't worry. As soon as she's gone, I'll take you home." I suddenly opened my eyes. The sky was already bright. A loud banging sound came from outside the door. I had just walked into the living room when my mother opened the door. Standing at the door was Ethan. His eyes were dark and swollen, his hair disheveled, as if he hadn't slept all night. "Uncle, Auntie, where is Clara?" My dad was reading the newspaper at the dining table without even looking up. "If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you banging on the door?" Ethan had no time for pleasantries and rushed past my mom. "Clara, where's the child?" I sat down at the dining table, leisurely peeling an egg. "What child?" Ethan's eyes turned red as he rushed over and grabbed my wrist. "The child I handed over to you last night. Where did you send them?" He had great strength, squeezing until my bones ached. My father slammed the newspaper down, stood up, and pulled him away. "Talk if you want to talk. What's with all the grabbing?" Ethan was panting heavily, his face frighteningly grim. "Clara, don't play dumb. Where is the child now?" I looked up at him and smiled. "You're so anxious. Is the child yours?" The room fell silent all at once. My mother stared at Ethan, her expression darkening. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed, his voice tight. "What nonsense are you talking? I just picked it up by the roadside." "Oh." I wiped my hands and stood up. "I sent him back to where he belongs." Ethan's pupils suddenly contracted. "Where did you send him?" "I sent her to her own mother's doorstep." As soon as I finished speaking, all the composure vanished from Ethan's face. He took a step forward, his voice almost a shout. "Clara, stop acting crazy. How could Lily?" He abruptly stopped mid-sentence. I looked at him, my smile deepening. "Go on. How could Lily know anything?" Ethan's temple twitched twice as he reached out to grab me. "Come with me to the hospital." My mother immediately stepped in front to block him. "What right do you have to take my daughter away?" Ethan's face was deathly pale, his chest heaving heavily. The child was abandoned in the fire escape in the middle of the night, freezing and running a high fever. He was just taken to the city children's hospital. "Clara, if you have any conscience left, come with me." My heart sank. Lily actually dared to do it. Caught on the hallway surveillance, she still dared to throw the child out. My dad was about to speak when I grabbed my coat. "Go. I also want to see what else she can act out." Half an hour later, at the entrance of the emergency ward, Lily sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders trembling as she cried. The baby on the bed had a flushed, feverish face, breathing rapidly and shallowly, with tubes attached to its body. A group of nurses hurried back and forth, their footsteps swift. I stood at the doorway, my brow twitching sharply. In my past life, I also guarded my son like this. When I carried him to the emergency room, my legs were so weak with fear, terrified that something might go wrong. Now, looking at this face again, my chest feels as if it's weighed down by a layer of ice. Lily looked up, saw me, and her tears fell even harder. "Clara, how could you do this? No matter what, a child is still alive. What if no one found them after you threw them in the fire escape?" I stared at her, smiling faintly. "You were quite quick to take the child when I left them at your door. How did he end up in the fire escape just by turning around?" Lily's face stiffened for a moment, but she quickly shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand what you're talking about. I came to work this morning and was temporarily assigned to the emergency department to help. Which is how I happened to run into this child. If I had met him earlier, I wouldn't have let him suffer like this. As she spoke, her eyes grew even redder, and her hands trembled as she held the child. What a convincing act. In my past life, I was completely fooled by this very act of hers. Ethan stood beside her, his face frighteningly dark. Clara, the child almost died, and you still have the nerve to throw mud at others. I was about to speak when Ethan pulled a small red booklet from his bag and slammed it heavily in front of me. See clearly. You are now his legal guardian. I lowered my head, and when I saw those words on the cover, a chill instantly shot up my spine. Adoption Registration Certificate. Turning to the first page. In the column for the adoptive parent, my name was clearly written. Clara. The child's name had already been filled in as well. Ethan. My mind buzzed, instantly recalling that incident from half a month ago. At the time, I was busy preparing materials for studying abroad, with copies of my ID card and household register all placed in a document folder. Ethan said he happened to be passing by and offered to help me get the stamp from the Education Bureau. I was genuinely moved for quite a while, thinking he had finally learned to be considerate of me. It turns out he had been setting a trap for me since back then. Ethan stared at my pale face, but his tone softened. Clara, I admit I acted first and reported later on this matter, but I really did it for your own good. The child is already registered under your name, and the paperwork is all done. Even if you want to have your own children in the future, it won't be a problem. Let's save him first, and we can talk about the rest later. I looked at him, my stomach churning. He really had the nerve. The nurse at the ward door happened to walk out briskly. Who is Clara? The child's condition has worsened and needs to be transferred to the intensive care unit immediately. A family member must sign. She directly shoved a stack of papers and a pen into my hands. I looked down, and the top line of text was particularly glaring. Critical condition notice. I held the pen, my palm cold. Ethan stood beside me, his voice low and rapid. Sign first. Clara, please, just sign it first. I slowly lifted my head to look at him. His face was filled with anxiety. He was completely different from the person I begged to take me to the hospital while lying in bed in my previous life. Clutching that pen, I suddenly laughed. I can sign. But first, answer me one thing. Is the child really not yours? Ethan's breath hitched abruptly. Lily also looked up instantly. The next second, Ethan reached out to snatch the pen from my hand. What are you messing around for at a time like this? I took a step back, staring at him coldly. The more you rush, the more I want to ask. Ethan, whose child is this? The lights in the hallway were glaringly cold. The critical condition notice is in my hand, crumpled into creases. Ethan stares at me, his breathing ragged. Clara, saving the child comes first right now. Other issues, once the child is out of danger, I'll explain them to you slowly. I smiled. I've heard enough of your explanations in my past life. As soon as the words left my mouth, my heart gave a slight tremor. The phrase past life was something only I could understand. Ethan wouldn't understand. He would only think I had gone mad. Sure enough, his frown deepened. What's wrong with you today? You're usually the kindest person. You even feed stray cats on the street. How could you be so harsh to a child? I slowly placed the pen in my hand back onto the nurse's tray. Can kindness put food on the table? After I sign, who will cover the subsequent expenses? If the child ends up paralyzed or disabled, who will take care of them? You? Or is it her? I raised my hand and pointed at Lily. Lily held the child, her eyes red as if about to bleed. Clara, I can help figure out the money issue. Just sign the papers first. The child is still young. His life is hanging by a thread. Don't take your anger out on him. She spoke with a mix of grievance and earnestness, and several nurses nearby turned to look at me as if I were the villain who refused to let go of someone's life. In my past life, I was most afraid of others seeing me this way, afraid that others would say I was petty, that I lacked compassion, that I was unworthy of being a doctor. So, I stepped back again and again, gave way again and again, until I let myself into the grave. I looked at Lily, a slight smile curling at the corner of my lips. You'll figure out the money. How do you plan to do that? With your nurse's salary? Or with that little bit of cunning in your belly? Lily's face instantly turned pale. Ethan finally got anxious, pulling me toward the corner. Clara, listen to me. He lowered his voice, his eyes even managing to squeeze out a hint of affection. Sign first. As long as the child can be saved, everything else can be discussed. Haven't you always wanted a home of your own? Once this is over, we'll get married right away. We'll have our own children in the future. I swear, our biological child will take your surname, and the family assets will also prioritize our biological child first. This child will only have a nominal status and won't affect you in any way. Please save him first. Okay. Every word felt like a slap across my face. I stared at this face, a buzzing sound ringing in my ears. He didn't even bother to change his trick. He tried to win me over with promises of the future, using marriage to coax me, using the promise of having our own children in the future to coax me. In my past life, I believed these lies, which is why I plunged headfirst into a deep well, only to have them press my head down with their feet. I stared at him intently, my voice chillingly soft. Ethan, when you say things like that, does your heart ever feel a twinge of guilt? The child just gets a title. They take the title. They take the household registration. They take the home. And in the end, they even take the money I worked so hard to save. You've really thought this through. Ethan's expression gradually froze on his face. He was about to speak when a sudden urgent alarm sounded from the hospital room. The nurse's face changed color and she immediately turned and rushed inside. The child is having convulsions. Quick, take them to the emergency room. The hallway instantly descended into chaos. I stood where I was watching coldly as doctors and nurses rushed past pushing a gurney. In my previous life, when I was wheeled into the examination room, Ethan sat outside scrolling through his phone. When the nurse called for a family member to sign, he found it troublesome and said to wait a bit. This wait caused him to miss the optimal treatment window. Now it was finally his turn to stand outside the door and taste this bitterness. Ethan's forehead was drenched in sweat as he threw himself before me once again. Clara, I'm begging you. As long as you sign, I'll listen to whatever you say from now on. If you want to go abroad, I'll support you. If you want to work, I'll support you, too. You've always been bothered by Lily and I promise I'll never see her again. Let's live a good life together. Okay. I stared at him, suddenly finding it laughable. At this point, this man still wants to have it both ways. He wants me to save the child and he still expects me to go back and live with him in the future. His calculations are practically hitting me in the face. I took a step back, my voice clear and distinct. I won't sign. This is my decision. If you want to save him, prove your relationship with the child and fight for custody. If you can't, then keep quiet. Ethan's face instantly contorted. Clara, have you lost your mind? This is a human life. If you refuse to save someone in need, how will you sleep at night from now on? I looked at him calmly. You were sleeping soundly when I died. As soon as the words left his mouth, his entire body froze. I stopped looking at him, turned around, and walked away. After just 2 steps, Ethan suddenly lunged from behind, grabbed my wrist, and forcefully dragged me toward the nurse's station. You must sign this today. If you sign it, we can still have children in the future. If you don't, it's over between us. My wrist ached from his grip, and my vision went dark for a moment. Several nurses in the hallway gasped in shock. I was just about to shake him off when a familiar voice erupted. Ethan, let go of me. My dad rushed over and kicked him right in the back of his knee. Ethan stumbled, nearly falling to his knees. My mother hugged me, her face pale with fright. Clara, are you okay? I suppressed the pain in my wrist and shook my head. Ethan steadied himself against the wall, his expression terrifyingly grim. Uncle, Aunt, please don't get involved. This is between Clara and me. My dad's temper flared up instantly. You've dragged my daughter into such a state, and you still have the nerve to tell us not to get involved. You used her ID to apply for adoption. Forced her to sign a critical condition notice. Do you really think the family has no one left? Ethan's face instantly turned pale. My mother shielded me behind her. Her gaze chillingly terrifying. Clara said last night that she left the child at Lily's doorstep. But how could the child end up in the fire escape today and be burned so badly? Lily, I don't believe a single word that comes out of your mouth. Lily's face paled with panic as she hugged the child and shrank back. Auntie, things aren't what you think. I've never even seen the child. If Clara is angry, she can take it out on me. But don't play with the child's life. She was crying, her voice trembling with emotion. My mother sneered coldly, pulling out her phone from her bag. Haven't you seen it? Fine. Then take a look at who exactly was the one carrying the child into the building in the hallway surveillance footage. The blanket in Lily's hand fell to the floor with a thud. As soon as my mom's phone lit up, the hallway fell silent. The first video was time-stamped at 9:47 p.m. last night. In the footage, I was holding the baby at the entrance of the 6th floor, ringing the doorbell, placing the swaddled infant down, leaving a note, and then turning to leave after the door opened. Lily peeked her head out, first looked left and right, then crouched down and quickly carried the child into the house. She moved swiftly, as if afraid of being seen. The second video was from 10:21. Lily had changed into a dark-colored coat, wore a mask, and carried the child out of the house. She didn't take the elevator, but instead carried the child directly into the stairwell. The third segment is the surveillance footage from the fire escape entrance. Lily looked around several times, then stuffed the child into an abandoned stroller in the corner, and pulled an old blanket over it. After doing all this, she practically ran away. The video was only a few dozen seconds long, but those few dozen seconds were enough. Everyone in the hallway stared at the screen, even holding their breath, looking at Lily's pale face. The pent-up anger in my chest finally eased by half. In my previous life, I died without even clearing my name. In this life, the evidence speaks for itself. Lily, my mother put away her phone, her voice cold as ice. Are you going to keep crying? Lily's entire body trembled, her lips quivering. She couldn't utter a single complete sentence. Ethan was also stunned. He stared fixedly at Lily, his face alternating between green and white, as if he had been publicly slapped several times. You took the child back and then threw him into the fire escape. Lily, have you lost your mind? At his shout, Lily's tears immediately welled up and fell. What else could I do? I just gave birth, and I'm still on probation. The hospital is packed with people. How could I dare carry him back to the dormitory? I thought someone would notice if I left him for a while. I never imagined he would burn like this. She cried so hard she could barely catch her breath, her legs giving way as she slumped to the floor. But in the hallway, no one sympathized with her. The head nurse's face turned dark. Are you the child's biological mother? Lily covered her face, crying so hard that her shoulders trembled. Now, even the last shred of dignity is gone. Ethan stood frozen in place as if someone had grabbed him by the throat. I turned to look at him, my voice low. Is it clear enough now whose child it is? You tell me yourself. Ethan's eyes were darting wildly, his temples drenched in cold sweat. He had always cared the most about his reputation. He pretended to be respectable at work, acted affectionate in front of me, and played the responsible man in front of Lily. Now, with the surveillance footage in place, the child's mother knelt on the ground, and everyone waited for him to speak. He had no way out left. The door to the emergency room suddenly swung open. The doctor hurried out, speaking rapidly. The child is in respiratory failure and must be intubated immediately. Are the biological parents here? Sign the consent form right away. The words lashed out like a whip. Lily collapsed on the floor, crying and shaking her head uncontrollably. I don't dare. I'm afraid. What she was afraid of was clear to everyone, afraid of having a criminal record, afraid of losing her job, afraid of being pointed at and cursed behind her back in the future. Ethan stood in place, his fingers clenching and unclenching repeatedly. The child's life and his face are finally about to become a choice between the two. I looked at him and slowly curled the corner of my mouth. In my past life, he pushed me to the front while hiding behind to maintain his respectable image. This time, I insist on watching him tear his own face apart. The doctor urged again. Hurry up. The child can't wait. Lily cried as she tugged at Ethan's pant leg. Ethan, sign it. Hurry up and sign it. Ethan looked down at her. The tenderness in his eyes completely shattered, leaving behind a mess of gloomy darkness. My dad spoke coldly from the side. The child is burning up like this, and you still won't admit it. Fine. I'll call the police for you. Forging adoption documents, abandoning an infant, causing trouble at the hospital. That should give you plenty to talk about. Ethan shuddered all over. Finally feeling as if he had been backed into a corner, he rushed over and snatched the paper from the doctor's hand. I am the child's father. She is the child's mother. I'll sign it. The moment those words were spoken, the hallway completely erupted. I closed my eyes, but my fingertips were tingling. In my past life, he never admitted it from start to finish. Even until my death, he was still lying to me, saying that the child was just someone he picked up off the street. Now, the phrase, I am the child's father, has finally been taken back by him. I lowered my head, pulled out the adoption registration certificate from my bag, and tore it page by page in front of everyone. The sound of the paper tearing was startlingly crisp. Ethan looked up at me, his eyes as if he wanted to devour someone. I threw the torn paper into his arms, my tone calm. From this moment on, the child has nothing to do with me. You three live your own lives. The doctor rushed into the emergency room with the consent form. Lily was still lying on the ground, crying. My dad had already taken out his phone and started calling the police. I want to report a case. Someone impersonated my daughter to handle an adoption, and they forced her to sign at the hospital and physically assaulted her. Ethan's face turned ashen. I turned my head, looking toward the window at the end of the hallway. The morning light was already filtering in. This time, I finally pulled myself out of their grasp. The phone vibrated right at that moment. The screen lit up with an email notification from the exchange program group. Please complete the exit registration in 3 days. I stared at those words, and my heart suddenly warmed. 3 days from now, I would be leaving. But just at that moment, Ethan, with reddened eyes, suddenly lunged toward me. Clara, you can't leave. Ethan's lunge was immediately intercepted by my father. His hand hadn't even touched me before he was already pinned against the wall by security. The police at the hospital arrived quickly. Ethan, Lily, and the adoption registration certificate I had torn up and pieced back together were all taken to the duty room. I also went along to give a statement. Sitting on that cold, hard chair, my wrist still ached faintly. In my past life, I was most afraid of making a scene, afraid of being laughed at by the neighbors, afraid of gossip at work, afraid of my parents losing face because of me. So, even when Ethan trampled on me time and again, I always thought of keeping it behind closed doors and dealing with it on my own. In this life, I've come to realize that pride is truly not worth as much as one's life. Evil people love to use these 2 words to silence others. By the time I left the police station, the sky was already bright. Lily was crying so hard at the door that she couldn't straighten her back. Ethan sat on the bench, looking several years older overnight. He saw me come out and abruptly stood up. Clara. I didn't stop walking. He caught up in a few steps, blocking my path, his eyes completely bloodshot. I admit to the adoption materials issue, but at the time, I was just too frantic. Could you please drop the case? I still need to keep my job, and Lily is still in the hospital. I looked up at him, almost laughing out loud at this point. He was still talking to me about work. In my past life, when I was sick to the bone, he talked about money. Now, with our child's life hanging by a thread, he's still talking about his future. This man has only ever loved himself from beginning to end. I walked around him, my voice cold and devoid of any emotion. Whether your future is ruined or not has nothing to do with me. Whether the child can be saved or not has nothing to do with me, either. Ethan, I don't want to see another moment of your future life. He stood there, his face ashen and utterly defeated. Clara, I truly regret it. I never intended to push you to this point. I'm just too afraid of losing you. Once you go abroad, you won't look back. I stopped walking and turned to look at him. You were right. This time, I really won't look back. That afternoon, I went home to pack my luggage. My mother sat on the edge of the bed, folding my clothes for me. As she folded, her eyes grew red. If I had known Ethan was that kind of person, I never should have let you get involved with him. I crouched on the floor and reached out to hug her. In my past life, I had treated all the advice from her and my father as nothing more than empty words. It wasn't until I had exhausted half my life that I finally understood those words from my elders were all meant to protect my heart. Mom, I'll listen to you this time. From now on, no one will ever be able to trade me for a better life. My mother's tears fell instantly. Go ahead. Go far. Go high. Don't look back at these dirty things anymore. I hummed in agreement, burying my face in her embrace. 3 days later, the child was out of critical danger, but due to the delayed rescue, there were lingering aftereffects in the lungs and nervous system. This news was something my dad heard from an acquaintance. When he said this, his tone was flat, without a hint of pity. I didn't say a word either. Ethan and Lily, in the end, managed to keep the child alive. Only by living can there be days to slowly repay. Before heading to the airport, Ethan sent me many messages. Clara, I'm sorry. I'll handle the matter with the child and won't disturb you anymore. Please don't block me. Let me know when you arrive safely. You've always wanted to see the outside world. I won't stop you anymore. When you come back, let's start over. Okay. I stared at the screen, my fingertips gradually turning cold. Start over. How light and airy those 4 words are. As if all the blood and tears from my 30 years in my previous life could be wiped away with just one sentence. I didn't reply and directly dragged the number into the blacklist. As the plane took off, I leaned against the window watching the ground gradually shrink. This city holds my most wretched and suffocating years, yet also the hands of my parents shielding me and the life I almost had snatched away. And now, I am finally leaving. Just before the flight attendant reminded us to turn off our phones, my phone vibrated once more. It was an email from an unfamiliar address. The title is very short. I'm getting married to Lily. I opened it, took just one glance, then turned my phone face down on my lap. Outside the cabin, clouds churned and the sunlight was blinding. I slowly closed my eyes. Very well. The despicable couple was finally tied back together. Let them chew on their own mess from now on. But I never expected that this parting would last 20 years. I never imagined that 20 years later, upon returning to the country, the first person to confront me would be the child sitting in a wheelchair. He shouted at me the moment he opened his mouth. Mom, you finally decided to come back. In my first year in Vienna, I was so busy I barely had time to catch my breath. Classes during the day, experiments at night, and joining the hospital project team with my mentor on weekends. Heavy coursework, difficult language, and a fast-paced life. Yet, every night when I collapse into bed exhausted, my heart feels at peace. That kind of peace was something I hadn't experienced for many years in my past life. I no longer revolve around bottles, diapers, the grocery market, and the emotions of the entire family. I have new subjects, new classmates, and a new world. The longest night I ever spent in the lab was to collect a set of gait rehabilitation data. At 4 o'clock in the morning, standing alone in front of the instrument, watching the curves running across the computer screen, I suddenly felt a lump in my throat. In my past life, this was clearly what I was best at. I could have kept moving forward instead of staying in a cramped room, wiping the drool of a child who wasn't even related to me by blood, listening to my husband and mother-in-law complain about how useless I was. At this thought, I took a deep breath and forced back my tears. Not worth it. Crying over that kind of trash is such a waste. I keep in touch with my family quite often. My mom sends me food, thick socks, and little sachets she sews herself every now and then. My dad doesn't know how to say sweet things. He just asks during video calls if I have enough money and if I'm living safely. Once, he even deliberately put on a stern face. saying everything at home was fine and that I shouldn't worry. After saying that, he turned the camera to the newly bought flowers on the balcony and asked me if they looked beautiful. I held back again and again, but after the video call ended, I still cried with my head on the table. The following year, I received a full scholarship from the project team. In the third year, my thesis was recommended by my advisor for an international conference. In the fourth year, I stayed at the school to continue my studies. Meanwhile, news about Ethan and Lily also reached my ears intermittently. Lily had a difficult time in the hospital due to abandoning her child and concealing her pregnancy. The rumors outside were harsh, and her superiors were keeping a close eye on her. Her transfer to another department fell through, and in the end, she simply resigned. Ethan also faced a period of turmoil at his workplace for forging adoption documents. He didn't go to prison, but his record was tarnished. The promotion that was once a sure thing slipped away, and after changing jobs twice, he only fared worse. The child developed problems with leg and foot movement and language development due to febrile seizures and delayed rescue efforts. Rehabilitation is a bottomless pit. Money, time, and patience, everything is poured into it. Every time my mother talks about these things, there's a chill in her tone. They argue every day now. Ethan says Lily harmed the child, and Lily says Ethan treats her as a breeding tool, blaming each other back and forth. Neither can clear their name. I listened, only softly humming in acknowledgement. It wasn't as satisfying as I had imagined. It felt more like an old wound that had been festering for years, finally beginning to scab over. In the sixth year, I received a very long email. The sender was Ethan. He said he regrets it. He said the child's medical expenses were like a leaky bucket, draining them day by day. He said he and Lily had long lost any affection, leaving only mutual resentment. He said that often, when he sees the notes I left in books long ago, he sits there for a long time. He said that back then he was too selfish, afraid I would fly too far away, afraid he could never hold on to me again. So, he used a child to tie me down. When I read that line, my chest felt slightly tight, afraid he couldn't hold on to me, so he simply cut off my wings. How perfectly logical. I didn't reply. Later, such emails became more and more frequent. Sometimes they were voice messages he sent while drunk in the middle of the night. Sometimes they were photos with the child lying on a rehabilitation bed, braces strapped to their legs, staring emptily at the camera. Sometimes it was even a photo of his marriage certificate with Lily, which he would send and then quickly retract, as if reminding me, look, this is the kind of life you were supposed to have. I never reply. Once, my mentor asked me why I looked so upset after reading the emails. I smiled and closed the email. Spam. He nodded and handed me a new project application form. Then delete it. You have more important things to do. Indeed, I have more important things to do. In the 10th year, I was leading a team independently. In the 15th year, I returned to China to attend a closed-door forum. The schedule was tight, and I didn't meet anyone. In the 19th year, a top medical school in China sent me a formal invitation, hoping I would return to attend the International Summit on Neurorehabilitation and give a public lecture for a new project. I forwarded the invitation to my mom. She was so thrilled she called me 2 extra times. Come back. This time, I'm coming back openly and honestly. Let those people see what kind of life my daughter has built for herself after leaving. I held my phone and looked out the window at the snow-covered street. My chest felt light, yet steady. It's been 20 years. Of course I should go back. But just the day after I booked my flight, my mom suddenly sent me a voice message. Her tone was unusually low. Clara, Ethan found out you're coming back to the country. He's been getting crazier over the years, and just the other day he came to our doorstep asking about you. Your return this time probably won't be very peaceful. After listening to the voice message, I stood by the window of my apartment for a long time without moving. The night pressed down heavily, and the glass reflected my face as it is now, mature, calm, with not a trace of unnecessary softness in my eyes. I set down my phone and slowly smiled. Sounds good. The debts from 20 years ago are just right to settle together. I never expected that on the day I returned to the country, just as I stepped out of the side door of the venue, a wheelchair would be blocking my path. The young man in the wheelchair looked up, his features strikingly similar to Ethan's. But the word mom that came out of his mouth made my stomach churn violently. Mom, you finally decided to come back. The child sat in the wheelchair, a thin blanket draped over his legs, and there was actually a hint of grievance in his eyes as he spoke. I stood where I was, watching him for 2 seconds. After 20 years apart, his face had fully matured. His eyes and brows resembled Ethan, but his lips were very much like Lily's. The ungrateful wretch I raised in my previous life has finally overlapped with this child in this lifetime. Just as self-righteous, just as insatiable. Before I could speak, Ethan had already stepped out quickly from the side. He has aged a lot. His hair has turned gray. His back is slightly hunched, and deep lines are etched at the corners of his eyes. But the familiar cunning in those eyes hasn't diminished in the slightest. Clara, we've finally waited for you. His tone of voice even carried a hint of deliberately feigned calmness and familiarity, as if the 20 years in between had never happened. Outside the venue, people came and went. I stood on the steps, looking down at them, not even bothering to give an extra expression. Out of the way. Ethan swallowed hard and reached out to steady the wheelchair. The child has always been in poor health, and his legs have been getting worse over the years. There's a new project abroad with a very high success rate. You have fame and connections now. Help him out. Let's just forget about all those past things. I almost burst out laughing. He really knows how to ask. A simple let's forget wants to erase the life I almost had buried back then. The child also looked up at me, his face wearing an expression of natural urgency. Mom, you're in this line of work. You must have a way. In my current state, I have no job, can't even get a girlfriend, and everyone avoids me when they see me. If you had signed for me back then, I wouldn't have been delayed to this point today. My gaze gradually turned cold. People passing by had already slowed their steps, stealing glances in this direction. Seeing this, Ethan quickly lowered his voice. It's not convenient to talk here. Let's find a place to sit and talk. Name your terms. Whether it's money or resources. As long as you're willing to help the child, I'll accept it. I looked at him and suddenly felt absurd. Even at this point, he still thought I would negotiate terms. In my past life, when I was lying on my deathbed, he spoke to me about money in this same tone. Now that I'm standing here, he still has that same expression on his face. I lower my gaze and slowly adjust my cuffs. First, I'm not his mother. Second, I have nothing to discuss with any of you. Third, if you stop me again, I'll call security. The child's face instantly changed. How can you be so cruel? This leg of mine clearly has something to do with you. He suddenly slapped the armrest of the wheelchair, his voice rising sharply. Several people stopped and looked over. My mind was completely calm as I took out my phone and directly opened the recording app. Go on. Say everything you want to say, one sentence at a time. Ethan's expression changed slightly as he stepped forward, intending to press my hand. Clara, why make such a fuss? The child is upset. Just let him have his way. After all, you did take care of him for a while. I looked up at him. You know perfectly well who I've raised. The adoption certificate was forged by you. The guardianship was acknowledged by you. And the child was born by you and Lily. Now you come to block me at a public event, talking non-stop about wanting me to contribute money and effort. You've got quite the imagination. Ethan was left speechless by my words, his face stiffening. The child's eyes turned red, his voice sharp and piercing. Don't you dare use that to pressure me. You have what you have today because you abandoned my dad and me back then, stepping on us to climb higher. You're living the high life now. What's wrong with helping me out a little? He got emotional and actually pushed his wheelchair toward me himself. The front wheel of the wheelchair slammed heavily into the steps, emitting a harsh scraping sound. I took a step back as the security guard had already been drawn over by the commotion here. Sir, please calm down. Ethan saw the security guards approaching and immediately panicked, quickly stepping forward to block them. This is a family matter. You don't need to get involved. Just then, A hoarse woman's voice rang out from behind. A family matter. You two really have the nerve to say that. I turned around at the sound of the voice and saw Lily walking over step by step. She was terribly thin, with dry, yellowish hair and a face that seemed to be nothing but skin stretched over bone. In her hand, she carried an old bag, its opening slightly ajar, revealing the handle of a knife. She stood at the bottom of the steps, her eyes frighteningly red, as if she hadn't slept all night. The moment Ethan saw her, his expression instantly changed. What are you doing here? Lily laughed, her shoulders trembling with the force of it. What am I here for? I came to see how you two, father and son, would kneel and beg her for money, only to kick me aside later. As she spoke, she violently threw everything from her bag onto the ground. Medical records, IOUs, payment demand notices, and domestic violence injury reports scattered all over the floor. A gust of wind blew, sending the papers flying everywhere. The crowd of onlookers grew even larger. I stood in place, my gaze fixed on that injury report, my heart completely unmoved. They were finally biting each other. Lily raised her head, staring at me, her eyes filled with twisted hatred. Clara, you've been waiting for this day for a long time, haven't you? She slowly reached into her bag and gripped the knife. The security guard reacted quickly and immediately rushed forward, but Lily was faster than anyone. She suddenly pulled out the fruit knife and lunged straight at Ethan. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have given birth to him back then. I wouldn't have lost my job. I wouldn't have ended up like this. Ethan's face turned pale, and he instinctively raised his hand to block. The blade slid across his arm, and blood instantly seeped out. Screams erupted instantly at the scene. The child, sitting in a wheelchair, shouted in terror, "Mom, have you lost your mind?" Lily turned around abruptly, her eyes bloodshot. Don't call me Mom. These past 20 years, you two, father and son, have dragged me into the mud. One blames me the moment he opens his mouth. The other asks for money the moment he opens his. Who do I owe anything to? As soon as she finished speaking, Ethan lunged forward and slapped her hard across the face. You, how dare you cause trouble here? The slap was delivered with tremendous force. Lily's face immediately swelled up on one side and the corner of her mouth split open. The crowd stirred, and security and venue staff rushed forward. I stood at the outermost edge calmly dialing the emergency number. Hello, this is the south gate of the International Medical Center. Someone is attacking people with a knife. There's also a case of long-term domestic violence, public harassment, and extortion. I have a recording here. My voice was surprisingly steady even to myself. The person on the other end of the line quickly took notes. After hanging up, I saved a backup of the recording and locked the screen. The child, standing nearby, was so anxious that his eyes turned red and he even raised his hand to push Lily. Put the knife down now. Do you want to kill me? Lily staggered from his push. She turned her head and the look she gave the child finally turned completely cold. There was no trace of motherly affection left in it, only rotten hatred. Harm you. Ever since you were little, you've been just like your father, always blaming me for everything. You blame me for your limp, for not finding a job, for not being able to get a wife. Do you have even an ounce of humanity in you? After she finished speaking, she raised the knife and charged toward Ethan again. This time, the security guard finally rushed forward, grabbed her arm and pinned her down firmly. The knife fell to the ground with a clang and rolled to my feet. I glanced down at it and took half a step back. The police arrived quickly. Ethan clutched his bleeding arm, his face ashen. The child, sitting in his wheelchair, cursed and raged. First at Lily, then turning to curse at me. Clara, you've been laughing at us all along, haven't you? You'll never see me do well in this lifetime. Delete the recording. Delete it now. He shouted, spittle flying everywhere. I stood on the steps quietly watching him. In my previous life, he stood by my bedside and told me to think of the living. In this life, he publicly begged me for resources, and when he couldn't get them, he started blaming me for ruining him. Father and son are exactly the same. Even their disgusting behavior is perfectly aligned. When the police came to take statements, I handed over the recording. The content was crystal clear, from Ethan begging me for help to the child accusing me, coupled with the pile of materials Lily threw throughout and the large number of onlookers at the scene. The situation simply couldn't be contained. The police took all three of them away. Just before getting into the police car, Ethan turned back to look at me. In his gaze, there was regret, hatred, embarrassment, and a hint of indescribable despair. Yet, I felt not the slightest stir in my heart. In my past life, when I died, he couldn't even spare a single tear for me. Now, no matter how miserable he is, it's not my turn to feel sorry for him. The incident caused quite a stir. The event organizers, fearing I might be affected, quickly arranged for someone to escort me to the hotel to rest. On the way, my assistant cautiously asked if I wanted to cancel the public lecture scheduled for the next day. I gazed at the rapidly receding street scene outside the window and shook my head. Proceed as planned. I'll say what needs to be said. The next day, the venue was packed to capacity. I stood on the podium wearing a dark suit. The lights shining down and the audience was so quiet that even the sound of turning pages was barely audible. I spoke about the long-term rehabilitation pathways following neurological injuries. I discussed patience, the critical window period, family support, and the irreversible consequences of repeated delays. In the audience, some were taking notes diligently, while others held up their phones to take photos. I held the remote control pen, my voice steady. 20 years ago, my life was almost dragged into a path from which there was no turning back. Fortunately, I managed to break free. After the lecture ended, the applause lingered for a long time as I stepped off the stage. My phone vibrated. It was a message from my mom. The police have results. Ethan is in big trouble this time. The old case of forging adoption materials has also been brought up, and it will be investigated together today. Lily's intentional assault won't be overlooked. The child caused a disturbance at the venue, made verbal threats, and pushed staff members. So, he also needs to go in to cooperate with the investigation. I stared at the screen, my fingertips slowly tightening, then slowly relaxing. Sounds good. Not a single one of them will get away. In the evening, I went to the riverside alone. The wind is strong, blowing my long hair back continuously. The river surface is dark and heavy, with neon lights in the distance spreading out in layers, like the city lights I saw many years ago when I was sitting on a plane. Back then, all I wanted was to escape. Now, standing here, my heart is calm. I didn't wait for any earth-shattering, perfect resolution, nor am I interested in writing my life story as one of forgiveness and letting go. Some debts people owe should be repaid with the rest of their lives. Some wounds left there, reminding me not to be foolish again, aren't so bad, either. The phone chimed again. My supervisor sent a new email, asking if I would be willing to serve as the co-leader for the domestic project. After reading it, I lowered my head and smiled, then replied with 2 words, I do. The river breeze brushed past my ears, cool and clear. I put my phone in my pocket, turned away from the riverbank, and never looked back. This time, my path lies ahead. As for them, let them stay in the mud and sink slowly.